We're coming to you from the NDTV studio at the Congress Center in Davos, and with me here, Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission. Dr. Ahluwalia, what's the sense you're picking up here in Davos about the mood? Is global recovery finally setting in?
I think the mood here is that 2014 is going to be a better year for all economies, industrialized economies, also the emerging markets. Actually, the background is very important because globally they're coming out of two very bad years. I mean, 2012 and 2013. I mean, these are years when in the Eurozone you had negative growth.
Right.
US growth was very low. Virtually every emerging market sort of dropped between 1.5 to 2 percentage points. I think for the first time, everyone seems to be agreed that things are going to move up. That doesn't mean they're going to move up hugely, but you know, better in 2014 than 2013. And you know, the global pundits got the last 2 years wrong, because if you look at the IMF's forecasts, say for the year 2013, it was shaded down by almost 2 percentage points in successive forecasts.
Right.
So I think they were a little depressed that every time they met, they thought it was going to get better, and it wasn't getting better.
But is there some sort of assurance coming in now that it is finally getting
better?
Well,
now, because you asked for mood, and now you're talking about assurance. There cannot be an assurance. And actually, if you look at all forecasts these days, they always tell you there are downside risks.
And the red flags are always highlighted.
But frankly, any forecast...
Because everyone got it so wrong with the global financial crisis that now everyone wants to be more cautious.
No, hang on. Again, there's a little subtlety. Everyone didn't get it wrong on the first part of the global financial crisis. Actually, the recovery from the Lehman Brothers crisis of 2008 was actually textbook positive. And India too.
Right.
You know, everybody went down in 2009, and in 2010, very strong recovery. In fact, in India, in 2010, about 8.2. In 2011, it ended up being 9.3. So, you know, the first thing they got right, it's the sovereign debt crisis in 2011, which hit everybody, and they didn't recover easily from that. They didn't, and we didn't either.
And the finance minister says it was our textbook policy prescription that led us to the kind of slowdown that we've done. So perhaps the kind of stimulus we gave after the financial crisis, the rising fiscal deficits, would you say that perhaps our policy prescription was incorrect, our response to the crisis was not quite right?
No, it depends on what timing you have in mind. Because, you know, I think what happened was that in the response to the first crisis, there's no doubt in my mind that we had to have a fiscal stimulus. The question is, how long should it have continued? Now, interestingly, our GDP numbers, when they first come out, were much lower than they ended up being. So had we known that in 2011, the GDP growth rate was going to be 9.2,
you would have withdrawn the stimulus much earlier.
But I mean,
the government,
whoever the monetary policy fellows would have started doing a contraction. They didn't. I think on the fiscal side, probably it's true that we continued the fiscal stimulus a little too much. But more important than that, I think the quality of our fiscal stimulus was not what it should have been. What we should have had is an investment-led fiscal stimulus. That's not easy to do, but if we had had an investment-led stimulus, we would have just sort of slowed down the investment gradually. We had a consumption-led stimulus, fertilizer, fuel subsidies, all kinds of subsidies expanding, taxes being cut. So actually the quality of our fiscal stimulus was not so good. But personally, it's not just the macro. I mean, I think the reason we slowed down after the second shock, after 2011, you know, when in 2011 the GDP growth went down to 6.2.
Right. Which
is pretty much what happened after the first crisis. But then it went to 8.2, 9.3. This time it didn't. After 6.2 it became 5, and there's going to be another 5 for 2013-14. Why did that happen? Well, I tend to agree with Raghuram Rajan, who said, you know, 1/3 of the slowdown is global. Because after all, the global...
But one third. The impression that you get from policymakers or each time the slowdown comes is, you know what, blame it on the global crisis.
That's absolutely...
So 1/3 is perhaps a correct assessment.
Every now and then I have to correct you. First, the Prime Minister himself has said part of the reason is global.
You agree it's 1/3?
Now, I haven't done the numbers, but I would...
Okay, I mean, just as an approximation, you would say...
I have no idea whether Raghu was doing back of the envelope, or this is the result of some...
But your back of the envelope is 1/3.
Between 1/3 and 40%, let's say.
Okay.
33 to 40% global. I do think that the majority of the explanation is the domestic sort of constraints that we ran, which we're now have been trying to address in the last year or so.
And it's really heartening to see that there's finally an admission coming to the fact that yes, there are domestic issues that have led to the slowdown.
Well, I don't know about finally. It's been there for the last 6 to 8 months, but
the impression one has is that whenever you talk about why India slowed down, the only answer you get from policymakers is it's because of the Eurozone crisis, it's because of the global financial crisis. So the admission and at least a realization
but you see, if you look at things that I've said, certainly, I've consistently said that it's part global. You know, the problem is in a lot of the criticism, people ignore the global completely, as if the whole slowdown was due to policy problems. Secondly, the policy problems are not easy ones. I think when we ran into, it's the investment that has slowed down, okay? And the investment has slowed down because regulatory clearances became very difficult to do.
And I'd like to talk to you about this because today I was interviewing some of the Indian leaders who are here in Davos, and they said, explain it to us. We have one minister and environment clearances don't come through. The minister changes and suddenly projects get off the ground. How does that work? What's the message we're sending to people about India's policy environment, regulatory environment?
No, I think the message we are sending, let there be no doubt about it. We are aware that the regulatory clearances were very unsatisfactory. When we went to the cabinet with the plan a year and a half ago, we categorically said that ministries are acting in silos. That's not the way to do it. We need an overview of problems and a problem-solving approach. That's why in January a year ago, following the plan approval, the Cabinet Committee on Investment was set up. I mean, Finance Minister strongly supported this argument and actually suggested that we had said we need a mechanism. He said, let it be a Cabinet Committee. We set up the Cabinet Committee. Now, what that Cabinet Committee has done is enabled us to take a consolidated view. That enables you to balance benefits against costs. That enables you to take a problem-solving approach. I mean, you know, for example, you can just reject a project, or you can say, well, look, why don't you adjust it a little bit here and then it's okay. I think that's what's happened. And I'm delighted that the regulatory clearances on the environmental front have in fact accelerated. I think it shows that there was something wrong earlier, and it's good for us to admit that and correct it. That's what we've done. But you know, let me say that many people express disappointment. I mean, they accept the fact that, yeah, clearances are coming. But they say, but the investment hasn't revived.
Right.
And I think the reason for that is that, you know, this was one constraint. But in the meantime, the financing situation changed quite a bit. And frankly, many of our entrepreneurs maybe sort of were over-optimistic in how easy it would be for them to get finance. So you're running into projects which are now finding financing
very hard. Right.
Partly, by the way, because the banks have become a lot tighter, which is good. You know, you don't want a credit-led boom-bust situation. You don't want an asset bubble in infrastructure projects that have problems. So the banks have begun to ask questions. We have to address all of this together.
Right, so you're saying financing is an issue why investments are not coming through. But coming back to clearances finally happening and environmental clearances getting off the ground, how much of a difference do you think that would make, and how much of a deterrent was that till now?
Look, there were two things that were absolutely vital.
Okay.
One, this is a sign of success of the policy that in the power sector we were able to generate a lot of new capacity.
Right.
I mean, in 1 year, we put in as much generating capacity as we had done in the whole of the 11th plan.
Right.
Now, that's a quantum change. So viewed as whether the power generation policy is successful, outstandingly so. But they weren't getting enough coal linkages because the coal stuff was a problem. Now, why was the coal stuff a problem? Actually, imported coal was available, but nobody wanted imported coal because it's more expensive. So it took a bit of time for the government to decide that, look, some of the older projects will keep getting domestic coal. All the new projects will get a mixture of domestic and imported coal.
Right.
As a result, and I think both the Power Ministry and the Coal Ministry deserve a lot of credit, as a result of that, like compared to March of last year, when almost 78,000 megawatts of generating capacity, which was coming on stream, didn't have any coal linkages. And banks were beginning to wonder, why on earth are we financing projects when there's no assurance that they're going to have fuel supply? As of now, about 70,000 megawatts have got that linkage.
Okay.
But the only thing is, it's a little more expensive. It's a mixture. And frankly, I mean, it's more sensible to have a little more expensive coal than to be uncertain about whether you're going to get coal or not. So that's one thing. Second is, on the coal production side, this regulatory stuff has now begun to loosen up. So hopefully, now trouble is, mines take a long time to develop. So I don't think coal production is going to jump up tomorrow. But people have a sense that, we're going to be able to get this going. Meanwhile, Coal India should produce more coal. We're trying to do that. Coal India should evacuate coal. Now there, you had a real issue, 3 railway lines, which could actually move 100 million tons of coal, which Coal India can produce, weren't getting environmental clearance. Now they've got it.
So you're saying the environmental clearances coming through will make a vital difference to the overall environment, and it'll finally bring back that confidence that things are moving?
I believe so.
Okay, so that's a positive for sure. You talked about the power sector, and I'd like to particularly touch upon some of the developments that have been taking place in the power sector. Right now, we have a Congress MP, Sanjay Nirupam, on a hunger strike saying reduce the power tariff in Mumbai. Do you think there's a case right now, given that you're saying input costs are going up so much, for power tariffs to come down?
Well, let me say, this is a tough one, and we're heading into an election. So, in all democracies, as you head into an election, the tendency to see what can be done, which is soft, kind of increases. In the specific case of
so you do admit that at least even the 20% cut done by Maharashtra is a pre-election move?
No, I want to clarify because, I had a chance to speak to Chief Minister Maharashtra, who's here in Davos, as you know.
Right.
And I asked him, I said, look, how come you've done this? Because this looks a bit odd. And what he pointed out, and I think they should clarify this, they themselves had felt that the regulatory system, given that costs are falling, the regulatory system had maintained tariffs too high.
Right.
And they had set up an expert committee way back in October or November to review that. That expert committee had said that given the costs and given the reductions that have taken, improvements in efficiency, the tariffs should be brought down.
That's an explanation that even Mr. Chavan gave us, but Dr. Ahluwalia, the timing, of course, coming months ahead of elections, coming weeks after the Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi went ahead with a similar move.
No, I accept the fact that, let's put it this way, what the Chief Minister said to me, and this is the important thing, they had set up a committee, that's a fact.
Right.
The committee had submitted a report. That's also a fact.
Right.
It's quite possible that they accelerated the decision because the Aam Aadmi Party's decision might have provoked a lot of people to ask for similar things. And if they were going to do it anyway, you can't fault them for that. I think on this whole power tariff business, the critical thing is it's the regulator who's meant to clearly indicate what's a legitimate cost. And I think what's happening is many people, and this is part of growing up, institutional filling out, people are questioning the regulators.
Right.
Maybe they don't know what they're talking about. Now, frankly, I think the important thing we should recognize is that we are trying to instill and institutionalize professionalism. I agree that regulators should be more professional, there should be more exchanges with the consumers, the system should be made more transparent.